Talk to me, brother, what's going on? Talk to me, what's going on? So you can know see we've got to find a
Goofal started welding like a train. Hey, Buddha getting banged there on the point. Goofal was enough, he decided there. Oh, I can hit some two pulls there. I get you there, man, don't smoke a poi, boss. Don't come on, we all on a mission here together. You know goffalons, peer pressure. Oh, I get you now, right, I'll eat two pulls.
Welcome to the Foggle Times. We have a special today. Today we are looking at Kelly Nim's thesis, The Goffal Speaks, Zimbabwean Coloured Ideology.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the podcast that, jumps right into the deep end of complex topics, trying to bring you the clearest, most compelling insights we can find.
And today we're tackling something that really challenges our ideas about identity itself.
Yeah, how it's formed, sometimes how it's, forced upon people, and how it manages to stick around, how it endures.
What if your identity wasn't really defined by what you are?
Right, but defined more by what you're not.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Being put in a box based on like an absence, a lack of fitting into the main groups.
It's a pretty profound thought, isn't it?
It really is.
Okay, so let's unpack this fascinating deep dive into identity and belonging. Our focus today, it's an in-depth look at what it means to be colored in Southern Africa.
Yeah, we're specifically looking at experiences in Zimbabwe and South Africa.
And our understanding here, it comes from some really rich sources. We're talking extensive ethnographic data collected over, 6 years?
Yeah.
Between 2004 and 2010.
That's right. Plus historical documents, government records, census reports, even contemporary media. It's grounded in academic study, yes.
But it's also deeply rooted in lived experiences, real people, real lives.
Absolutely. And our mission, really, for you listening, is to help navigate this incredibly complex identity. It's often contradictory, but also just deeply resilient, the colored community's identity.
We want to examine how it was shaped, really hammered into shape, by colonial rule.
And how it keeps evolving, in the post-colonial context, which brings its own challenges.
And what it all means for individuals, people grappling constantly with their sense of place, their belonging, their worth, really.
It's a constant negotiation.
And this isn't just like a history lesson about one region. It's a really profound look at how categories, whether they're imposed from outside, by power structures.
Or maybe embraced from within, by the community itself.
Yeah, how they deeply shape human experience.
Yeah.
How they dictate social structures, influence individual choices.
And you'll find insights here, we think, that echo far beyond Southern Africa. It gives you a lens, maybe, to understand identity struggles everywhere.
It's really about how we all, in our own ways, find and define who we are in relation to the world around us.
Yeah.
Hashtag defining coloredness, a category of ambiguity. So to really start this journey properly, we need to get our heads around the term colored itself.
Right. Because in today's world, you hear that word and it can mean a lot of different things. Often negative, sometimes just descriptive, someone not white.
But for this deep dive, it's absolutely crucial to understand we are talking about a very, very specific Southern African phenomenon. It's a unique historical and social construct from that region.
Precisely. In this context, colored refers to people of mixed racial origin. Primarily, that means individuals of European and African descent.
But sometimes Asian heritage got included in that category too, right? In Southern Africa specifically.
Yes, historically that happened. And it's so important to stress this isn't a global term. It's not the same as mixed race or multiracial identities you might find elsewhere.
It's a term really born out of that specific colonial history in that part of the world.
Exactly.
And it's not just about shared genes, is it? The sources make this really critical distinction between community and category.
That's a key point. Community implies, a shared identity, a sense of belonging people feel among themselves, a group they define for themselves.
But category, especially back in the colonial era, that had a very specific, very rigid, often oppressive legal meaning.
It did. It meant a classification coloredness that basically dictated your life, where you could live, work, who you could marry. Everything.
Wow.
Yeah, and this linguistic nuance, this difference between feeling like you belong somewhere and having a label slapped on you from outside, it points to something much deeper and more painful.
The term colored in Southern Africa wasn't just descriptive, it was loaded. Historically loaded. It structured society, created these strict hierarchies.
And profoundly impacted lives. It started as an imposed status, a government classification designed purely for control.
But then, as sometimes happens with these labels, right, over time, it also became an identity that many embraced, reclaimed it maybe, forged their own sense of self within those boundaries.
It's that complex evolution from imposition to identity.
So here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit unsettling. This idea of being defined almost totally by what you aren't. One source puts it so powerfully, the external view of coloreds was someone that is not white and not black and is also not Indian.
Imagine existing like that. Your main identifier is just a negation, a not this, not that.
It led to some pretty dehumanizing labels, didn't it? Like non-person, leftovers, or even chillingly the rest.
Just lumped together as the rest. It's an identity basically formed in the cracks, in the spaces between the established racial poles.
And what's really illuminating, as the sources point out, is how this way of talking, this framing, it wasn't accidental.
Not at all. It was a potent ideological tool. It carefully reflected these deeper anxieties, these fears within the colonial system itself.
Specifically, this pervasive colonial fear that shaped attitudes and policies.
Yeah, there was this widespread, deeply ingrained idea that coloreds were somehow always under the wing of whites.
Like they couldn't stand on their own 2 feet.
Exactly. That they had no history of governing themselves, and so the conclusion was they must be supervised.
That reveals a really profound colonial anxiety, doesn't it? About keeping power, keeping control.
Absolutely. Any group that blurred that strict black-white line was seen as inherently unstable, lacking autonomy, needing constant watching.
To stop them upsetting the carefully built social order.
It's a classic example of a system trying to control who belongs and who holds power, just through definitions and classifications.
And this wasn't just talk, was it? It wasn't just a feeling in the air. It was meticulously written into law.
Oh, completely. The sources show how this fits perfectly into the colonial toolkit for managing race.
For building that racial hierarchy. In southern Rhodesia, for example, the colonial administration set up 4 distinct legal categories.
Right. You had black, meaning the indigenous Shona or Ndebele peoples.
Then white people of European descent.
Third, colored, specifically mixed European and African descent.
And finally, Asian, mostly people with Southeast Asian heritage.
And what's really striking, and tells you a lot about their sort of in-between status, is how often the colored and Asian categories just got collapsed together.
Yeah, lumped in together, further emphasizing that they were other, outside the main black-white poles.
It absolutely demonstrates a very clear, very deliberate divide-and-conquer tactic. That's a classic colonial strategy, isn't it?
Create these distinct boxes, enforce them rigidly.
And you prevent solidarity. You stop unified resistance among the people you're ruling.
Coloreds were strategically placed then, occupying this unique social and economic position between blacks and whites.
Effectively serving as a buffer, or an intermediate class.
And this middle position, it came with certain, privileges compared to the black majority. Slightly better education, maybe housing, jobs.
Nominal privileges, yes. But crucially, this fostered internal divisions. It kept the broader colonized population fragmented.
And reinforced the colonial power structure.
Exactly. It really underscores how race isn't biological reality. It's, as the sources say, a fluid, transforming, historically specific concept.
It gets its meaning from the theories and social ideas floating around at any given time.
It's a social invention. Constantly being negotiated, constantly being made and remade. #tag the colonial crucible shaping an identity pre-1980.
Okay, so with these rigid categories locked in place, let's trace how this actually played out in the day-to-day lives of colored people, especially before Zimbabwe's independence in 1980.
Yeah, the timeline of racial segregation in Rhodesia, it's quite stark when you look at it. It's just this relentless tightening of control right from the beginning.
Starts with the British South Africa Company, the BSAC, their 1889 charter, the Pioneer Column, arriving in 1890.
And immediately, discrimination wasn't just there, it was woven into the fabric of this new society they were building.
The foundational laws came thick and fast, didn't they? Systematically stripping freedoms, cementing the racial hierarchy.
Take the Vagrancy Act of 1893. Seems minor, maybe, but it said only natives had to carry a pass.
That's not minor at all. That's fundamental. It sets up surveillance, validates the state's power to define who belongs and who doesn't in everyday movement.
Exactly. Then, 1895, the country gets officially named Rhodesia, a symbolic takeover, really.
And the police are explicitly told distinguish between colored, native, or European.
And only natives are forced to live in specific, usually pretty undesirable locations. This early sorting laid the groundwork for decades of intense segregation.
And the control went right into the most intimate parts of life, which really shows the core anxieties of the settlers, doesn't it?
The Immorality Ordinance of 1903. Harsh punishments for interracial sex.
Which the sources identify as the settlers' greatest fear, miscegenation, race mixing.
It wasn't just about morals, was it? It was about maintaining this idea of racial purity, and by extension, the purity of their power structure.
Yeah, this fear of blood mixing. It became almost part of the early Afrikaner national identity.
It's a really striking example of how this deep fear, this anxiety about keeping racial lines clear, wasn't just made into law.
It became tradition, an ideological tool to stigmatize coloreds.
Exactly, because they were, in a way, the living proof of the transgression the state wanted to prevent. So they had to be carefully managed, contained, kept in their place.
Moving on, the laws just kept carving things up, restricting access. Fast forward to the Land Apportionment Act of 1930. That was a huge one, wasn't it?
Absolutely pivotal. It legally divided the entire colony into racially distinct zones,
Making sure the best farmland went exclusively to white settlers.
while indigenous Africans were pushed onto smaller, much less fertile reserves.
And then you get things like the Liquor Act of 1938. It sounds almost absurdly specific.
It really does. Only whites could legally buy European booze. Coloreds could drink it but couldn't buy it.
And blacks couldn't buy or drink it.
It's those kinds of seemingly small, everyday rules that show just how pervasive it all was, how deeply embedded the hierarchy became in just normal life.
Absolutely. It's those specific daily restrictions from land ownership to what you could drink that just normalized the whole racial system for generations.
And the Native Accommodation and Registration Act, or the Urban Areas Act of 1946, cemented it further.
Dividing cities racially, controlling Africans' movement, forcing them into townships, limiting where they could be in white areas.
This whole legal framework just created this meticulously segregated society where everything from birth to death was governed by your racial classification.
And then things ramped up again with the Rhodesian Front, RF era, 1962 to 1980, led by Ian Smith.
Right, his Unilateral Declaration of Independence, UDI, in 65, defying Britain to keep white minority rule.
And the RF were pretty open about it, weren't they? They explicitly aimed to refine the doctrine of white supremacy. No hiding their intentions.
None at all.
So what did this era of, well, overt white supremacist rule actually mean for the colored community day to day? How did these harsher laws hit them?
Well, it raises that critical question about the state's role, doesn't it? Constructing and enforcing these boundaries as a tool of domination.
During the RF era, coloreds found themselves banned from even more public spaces they might have shared, minimally, with whites before, like certain schools, hospitals, sports facilities.
Yes, and there were actual attempts to remove them from white residential areas, just tightening that segregationist grip.
Yet in this bizarre contradiction.
Exactly. Despite all this, the 1969 Constitution actually classified coloreds and Asians as European.
Which sounds good on paper, but
it was largely meaningless, an empty promise, a strategic move, really.
offering no real benefits, no access to actual white privileges.
Pretty much none. Its main purpose seemed political. Stop them identifying with and, crucially, supporting the African nationalist movements. Keep them in that buffer role.
So the day-to-day reality, the application of the laws, was much more important than the label on paper.
Absolutely. It meticulously shaped identity, cultural practices, creating this incredibly rigid, often absurd, and deeply unjust social structure.
So even if they were technically European in that constitution, they were still very much stuck in that middle ground, that intermediate status.
Very much so, occupying that unique socioeconomic spot, often seen by others and maybe sometimes by themselves as both instruments and beneficiaries of the colonial system.
It sounds like a really complex balancing act. Limited privilege on one hand, constant othering on the other.
Precisely. And that intermediate status did come with certain, though very limited, privileges compared to the Black majority.
Like education, you mentioned schools.
Yes, educational opportunities, though strictly segregated, did exist for colored children. Primary schools specifically for them started appearing in the late 1920s.
And enrollment went up quite a bit in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
After compulsory education came in. The tables and the sources show that.
They do. Table 2 and Table 3 show that increase. But, and this is a huge, but secondary education often meant leaving Rhodesia altogether.
You had to go to Cape Town
Yeah.
in South Africa.
Often, yes. Which was a massive financial and logistical burden. It just highlights the stark inequalities even within this supposedly privileged space.
That's a massive commitment. Really shows the limits of that privilege.
What about jobs?
Employment.
The sources mention coloreds often took jobs that whites found too arduous, distasteful, or unrewarding.
But they were still mostly in skilled labor sectors, unlike many black workers who were kept in unskilled jobs.
Generally, yes. Things like bridge building, bricklaying, various trades and businesses.
And a professional class emerged too. Teachers, nurses.
Definitely. Many became respected teachers and nurses. The sources name people like Janice Hall and Elphin Mackay in clothing, Paul Pretorius and Ray Smith as teachers, Priscilla Ahmed and Cynthia Smith as nurses.
And they often serve both colored and sometimes black communities, kind of embodying that middle position again.
Exactly. And this distinct economic niche allowed for a degree of stability, even some prosperity for some.
Like Petronella Rahman, quoted in the source, reflecting on the Federation years, 1953-63, she said they enjoyed a comfortable life with more opportunities for work, education, and progress.
Yes, and they had access to specific home purchase schemes in designated colored suburbs, like Barham Green and Thorngrove and Bulawayo.
Barham Green, BG, became the area for the professional coloreds, teachers, nurses, business owners.
That's right, with quite elaborate homes, sometimes even swimming pools, which really signified their upward mobility, their adherence to a certain standard of living.
A standard very different from the conditions most black people faced, which just reinforced their distinct, if ambiguous, social standing.
Absolutely.
So the sources say whiteness and coloredness was imbued with an obligation to maintain certain social status. That's powerful.
It is. It shows how internalized these hierarchies became. It wasn't just about money, it was about upholding a perceived social and cultural superiority, sticking to certain westernized norms, behaviors, distinguishing themselves from the black majority.
Which brings us to the role of Christian missionaries. Significant, but complex.
Very complex. From the missionaries' viewpoint, they saw themselves as having a duty bound to protect coloreds.
Protect them from neglect
And-
and moral corruption.
Yes, and often they blamed the very existence of colored people on the sexual irresponsibility of whites, which is quite a paternalistic, judgmental view itself. They felt this moral need to step in.
And it was more than just protection, wasn't it? The sources suggest the institutional homes and schools they set up were key.
Key not just for education, but for actually transmitting the culture that came to define colored identity.
Fostering a sense of group belonging through shared experiences, a common cultural framework based on Christian values, Western customs.
Yes, the church became deeply woven into their identity. For many Zimbabwean participants in the study, being seen as moral, civilized, part of being historically colored, meant belonging to certain Christian churches.
Mostly Anglican or Roman Catholic historically, though some moved to Pentecostal or Seventh-day Adventist later, and some were Muslim too.
That's right, reflecting broader trends and acknowledging the inclusion of some Indians in the colored category. But even inside the church, the racial lines often held, subtly reinforcing the social order.
Paul Pretorius mentioned that, didn't he? Reflecting on before 1980. Even when whites and coloreds went to church together.
There was often spatial separation, whites in the front and us in the back, as he put it.
Wow. It's subtle, but deeply powerful. Shows how ingrained those structures were, even in spiritual life. #tag post-colonial contradictions, the struggle for place, post-1980.
So then we get to 1980, independence, a huge moment, a promise of reconciliation.
Yeah, Robert Mugabe's inaugural speech, April 17, 1980, famously described as a transcendent call for racial reconciliation.
Promoting this idea of a unified Zimbabwean identity, inclusive, meant to cover everyone, regardless of race.
He called for oneness derived from our common objective, to build a great Zimbabwe that will be the pride of Africa. That must have ignited so much hope.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for a community like the Coloreds, who had always been in that ambiguous space. They, along with many others, initially welcomed this with real optimism.
Saw it as maybe, finally, liberation from those rigid colonial boxes.
But the harsh reality on the ground, it quickly ran into dissent and disagreement. That promise of reconciliation started to fray almost right away.
And sadly, for groups like the colored community, the new era brought its own set of deep contradictions, a renewed fight for their place, their belonging.
The rhetoric of unity just didn't always match the reality of inclusion.
And tragically, this deepening crisis, this exclusion, it started with horrific events like the Gukurahundi campaign, 1983 to 1987.
While not directly targeting coloreds, this brutal military operation in Matabeleland had a devastating effect on innocent civilians.
And it brutally solidified the ruling party's power, didn't it? Despite international condemnation.
It did. And it chillingly revealed this grim tribalistic element within the new government, the Ndebele being punished by the Shona-dominated 5th Brigade.
Setting a really dangerous precedent for state control, use of force, creating this climate of fear, uncertainty.
Which inevitably affected other minorities too, including coloreds. It showed the state was willing to define and punish groups it saw as other.
The tribal violence of Gukurahundi, thousands of innocent Ndebele killed, terrorized. It was a horrific betrayal of that initial promise of unity.
It consolidated power under ZANU-PF and sent a clear message. Inclusion was conditional. Ethnic loyalties could trump national identity.
And that context is crucial, isn't it, for understanding what happened next with the colored community, especially around the really contentious issue of land redistribution.
Yes, the land issue. Perhaps more than anything, this highlighted just how fragile their post-colonial position was.
Mugabe renewed his promise in 1999, seize white-owned farms for landless blacks, intended to fix historical wrongs.
But ironically, this process rekindled feelings of exclusion and insecurity for about 32,000 coloreds who were also landowners or had claims to land.
They found themselves yet again being seen as alien settlers in the new Zimbabwe, denied their history on the land despite being there for generations.
The sources even quote that stark, painful line from someone on the ground. War Veterans Act is for Africans, not for Makarati coloreds.
And that case of the 5 colored ex-combatants, denied war veteran status, denied compensation, even though they fought for the very independence that was now excluding them.
That denial of veteran status is such a powerful example. It shows how the post-colonial state, despite liberation rhetoric, effectively redrew the lines, remarginalized the colored community.
Deemed not African enough to share in the rewards of the new system.
Which leads straight to their uncertain citizenship status, symbolized most starkly by that infamous 00 status on their national ID cards.
So even after independence, they're still grappling with their legal existence, this bureaucratic stamp marking them as other.
Exactly. The 0 literally meant alien status or non-citizen, unlike the 01 for Shona or 02 for Ndebele ethnic identifiers.
That's a profound exclusion, isn't it? It basically says, despite being born here, despite your history here, you're not really from here.
And then the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2001 hit mixed race and Asian communities particularly hard,
requiring them to give up any claims to a second citizenship, forcing a choice between roots elsewhere and their shaky status in Zimbabwe.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's chilling. It shows how states can use these seemingly neutral tools, legislation, administrative codes to define, control, and ultimately marginalize identities, even after colonialism.
Often just perpetuating the old divides, but in new ways, transforming colonial discrimination to post-colonial exclusion.
And this legal othering, it had real tangible effects, especially on colored political disenfranchisement.
That's a crucial point. Paul Pretorius, the Petard teacher mentioned earlier, he really painted a picture of this political helplessness.
Yeah, he lamented having nowhere to go as a colored, felt they just weren't counted as part of the population.
He felt he couldn't become an MP. And maybe even more painfully, that no black man will speak on behalf of the coloreds. That's a deep sense of isolation, abandonment, political invisibility.
And this political powerlessness, it fed into this pervasive climate of fear.
Complaining about their situation could get you labeled racialistic by the government.
Easily. And even church ministers who spoke out reportedly faced arrest.
Creating a chilling effect, stifling any organized protest or advocacy.
So even as their economic and social situation got worse, their ways to seek change were being shut down.
So in response to this silencing, this disenfranchisement, the NAACP was formed, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Peoples in Zimbabwe.
Yes. Established in Harare in 2001, their goal was bold. Recognize and maintain colored status. Address injustices, past and present.
Their mission sounded comprehensive. Identify and fix injustices. Remove negative stigma. Rebuild self-awareness. Fight marginalization. Promote self-expression.
A big agenda. But the government, predictably maybe, neither recognized nor supported the NAACP.
Which led to scattered participation, because people were genuinely afraid to fight for their place. As Stanley Staton, a branch head, sadly admitted.
That lack of government recognition really highlights the state's underlying wish, perhaps, for the colored category to just disappear, to be absorbed into the wider African community.
A wish not always shared by coloreds themselves, who developed their own distinct identity.
Exactly. This deliberate non-recognition put them in this incredibly difficult spot. effectively framed as alien settlers with little or no permanent stake in the country and very limited citizenship rights.
Caught between a past that categorized them and a present that seemed to want to erase them.
This political and social insecurity, feeling like an alien settler in your own home, it inevitably caused severe economic problems.
It led many to make that tough choice, migrate.
Bonita Mack, the former dental assistant, she summed up that despair, the declining opportunities. Everything is bad now because of the economy.
At first, things were better and we were hopeful, but now things are awful, especially for us because blacks don't respect us and the government doesn't force them to. That's a feeling of being right at the bottom of the new hierarchy.
And this widespread feeling of disrespect, lack of opportunity, it created this group of what the sources call economic prisoners.
Mostly older coloreds who stayed, tied down by immovable assets such as a home, land, or small businesses, things they couldn't just leave or sell easily.
Exactly. Paul Pretorius put it well when he had talked about money invested here, his life savings, property. He told the researchers something like, "My life savings, everything I built is tied up here. My home, my small plot, it's all here." Leaving means abandoning decades of work, walking away with nothing. So we stay, watching things change, knowing we're trapped by our own history here.
That's heartbreaking. But for many others, especially the younger generation, maybe feeling they had less to lose, the answer was to leave. A mass exodus.
Yeah, the sources describe a really dramatic population shift. Whites and coloreds leaving Zimbabwe, especially accelerating after the late 90s, driven directly by the economic and political chaos.
Tables 17 and 18 in the source material really show that demographic drain, don't they? People voting with their feet.
They do. The main destinations: UK, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia.
And the choice was often strategic. Moving where family or friends had already set up networks. For support, a softer landing.
Often, yes. Critical support systems, like May and Ray Smith going to Queensland, Australia, using family ties. Their kids, Raymond, Leanne, Coy Smith, settling in Bristol, UK, expanding those diaspora networks.
Lifelines in uncertain times.
But even for those who got out, challenges didn't just disappear. The sources mention many uneducated or undereducated colored migrants faced real struggles abroad, finding work, resources.
Often having to pool money, relying on collective survival tactics. Migration offered escape, but not always an easy route to prosperity.
No, often trading one set of difficulties for another.
And despite all the hardships in Zimbabwe and in their new homes, there's this deep nostalgia, isn't there, for home.
Profoundly persists. Many who left still talk about wanting to return, even dreaming of it. It shows this deep, complex bond with Zimbabwe.
Which endures despite the chaos that literally pushed them out.
Yeah.
Complicates any simple idea of just escape or abandonment.
It really speaks to that enduring human connection to your homeland, doesn't it? No matter the challenges. Hashtag tag tag the fabric of everyday life, how identity is lived and maintained.
Okay, so we've looked at the big historical and political forces shaping this identity. But how does this complex colored identity actually, happen in the rhythm of everyday life?
Right. Let's step into their homes, their churches, their social hangouts, because one really powerful marker is simply where people live, residence.
Bulawayo, for instance. It fits perfectly with Smout's classic model of town development in this region, doesn't it? Reflecting a clear topography of power etched right onto the city map.
Yes, Bulawayo's structure was deliberately designed to reflect and reinforce that racial hierarchy. You had the low-density European center,
radiating out to medium-density colored suburbs like Barham Green, Thorngrove.
And then further out, the high-density black dormitory areas, the townships. This spatial segregation wasn't random. It was a deliberate, visible mapping of racial hierarchy onto the city, a constant reminder of your assigned place.
After 1980, independence, the legal racial segregation ended. Officially.
Right. And the sources note many coloreds took that chance, moved into previously whites-only suburbs like Hillside, Malandela.
That was a big shift, wasn't it? A tangible sign of breaking old barriers.
Symbolically and practically, yes. A step towards more freedom, more choice, physically breaking down legal walls.
But interestingly, some older coloreds, people really rooted in their communities. Like Priscilla Homid and Herb Levendale. They resisted moving.
They did. They saw places like Barn Green, BG as the absolute center of colored life, full of established social networks, churches, shops they knew.
For them, moving meant giving up a cherished community, a whole way of life.
It highlights that internal complexity of identity, doesn't it? Sometimes even when the external walls come down, people choose to stay within their cultural communal spaces. Shows a powerful pull towards familiarity, belonging.
Meanwhile, Thorngrove, the historically poorer colored suburb, it visibly deteriorated. Now it looks more like a high-density black suburb because of housing shifts.
Tragically, yes. Illustrates how dramatic demographic changes can physically impact, even erase, a community's traditional physical footprint.
And we can't talk about where people live without mentioning the huge impact of forced removals in South Africa. Cape Town's Elsie's River, District 6.
Elsie's River, out on the Cape Flats. It's a direct, painful result of South Africa's notorious Group Areas Act.
That awful law that forcibly moved non-whites out of vibrant city areas into segregated townships just tore communities apart.
In District 6, it stands as such a uniquely powerful symbol of that displacement, that loss.
The District 6 Museum in Cape Town today. It's a poignant testament, isn't it, to the rich colored life that thrived there and the loss from forced removals.
It's a living museum, a physical reminder of a painful past that just refuses to be silenced or forgotten. It makes sure the memory of those removals, of that vibrant community destroyed so brutally, doesn't fade.
More than just artifacts. It's a direct challenge to any idea that colored identity is somehow so-called or invented. It asserts its authenticity, its deep history.
Absolutely.
Beyond where people live, social spaces, daily practices. They also powerfully show how colored identity persists, how it's constantly reinforced.
Yeah, despite legal changes, the end of formal segregation, the sources show coloreds continue to socialize mainly, almost exclusively, with other coloreds.
That enduring self-segregation, even when it's not legally required anymore.
Yeah.
It's striking, isn't it? Points to a powerful internal cohesion.
It really does. It reflects deep-seated social habits, shared cultural tastes, maybe a comfort and familiarity after generations of being forced apart.
Like in churches. Legally desegregated, but the old patterns often reappeared. Subtly.
Sometimes, yes,
Yeah.
through unspoken cues. Mae Smith, one participant, shared a telling story. She'd go to Saturday services with the whites to avoid the blacks on Sundays.
Wow. That clearly shows how spatial separation got recreated by personal choice, not law, but still happening, highlighting this ongoing self-imposed social distancing.
And this carries over into informal community get-togethers, which really illuminate the texture of daily life.
The sources describe these lovely monthly tea parties at homes like Chris Van Rensburg's in Barham Green. Mostly colored women gathering, chatting about clothes, business, family.
But what's particularly telling, maybe unsettling for outsiders, is that recurring detail being waited on by black domestics during these parties.
Right. That practice, employing black domestic workers, often living in poor conditions right there on their property, it clearly reinforced a perceived colored superiority, echoing those colonial dynamics.
The social and cultural invisibility of these workers was common. Their presence often didn't stop racist remarks from colored employers who saw themselves as culturally superior.
And this perpetuated that rhetorical nostalgia among older coloreds, that constant monologue confirming the superiority of the Rhodesian past over the Zimbabwean present.
Yes, viewing current national problems as definitive proof that Africans were just not ready for the responsibilities of government. It's complex, almost paradoxical. A marginalized group internalizing and reproducing parts of the very system that marginalized them.
Meanwhile, the younger generation had its own social scene. Friday nights at clubs like Brass Monkey, Saturdays at Bangalanga, playing American hip-hop, South African rock.
Yeah, and Sundays often meant cricket or volleyball matches, frequently involving heavy drinking, sometimes fights breaking out.
And then the big one, the Rhodes Jubilee House fundraiser, largest annual colored event in Bulawayo, draws hundreds.
A massive community gathering, but also, strikingly, often marked by similar patterns, heavy drinking, occasional fights. What does that tell us about the community's internal dynamics?
Well, these social rituals, formal or informal, they all contribute to defining and reinforcing colored identity, don't they? Creating spaces for belonging, shared experience.
Definitely. And the prevalence of heavy drinking at casual get-togethers and big events, it's a particularly noticeable cultural marker.
Raises that fascinating, difficult question.
Yeah.
Is it an escape from the post-colonial trappings, lack of respect, limited opportunities, political powerlessness?
Or has it become an internalized colored practice, a defiant symbol of group solidarity, a way of saying, this is us, like it or not, or maybe a coping mechanism for always being othered?
The sources suggest it's probably a complex mix of all those things.
Likely. And younger coloreds, say 2035, also brought marijuana, ecstasy, even psilocybin mushrooms into their social mix, marking a generational shift in this cultural expression, maybe reflecting global trends, but within their unique context.
Let's dig into some of the most visible cultural markers. Language, for starters, English is primary for most, spoken with a distinct accent maybe.
Yes, English is the main language, but the sources note only a tiny minority, just 3 informants, spoke an indigenous African language like Izindabele.
And the justification was often like, I am an Englishman, I speak English. A clear cultural alignment with whites, distancing from African languages seen as theirs, maybe lower status.
That linguistic choice is very significant. And in Zimbabwe, this unique English variant called Kabyd slang developed among colored youth.
Not just casual slang, but an expression of resistance and defiance against formal English, the old social order.
Exactly. It had its own rules, often ignoring standard grammar, using strong, sometimes offensive language as a form of rebellion, an identity marker, carving out their own linguistic space.
And in Cape Town, similarly, there's colloquial Cape-colored Africans, widely used with its own vocabulary grammar influenced by standard Africans.
Yes, and UNESCO even recognizes colored English as a distinct variant of South African English, cementing its unique linguistic place.
Then there's the drinking again, and among the young, drug use. Heavy drinking of Castle beer, Jameson whiskey, common across generations, seen as a defining marker.
Almost ritualistic. Christian Van Beek, that 18-year-old diesel mechanic, put it bluntly, "You are not colored if you don't drink." That's powerful.
Raises that same fascinating, maybe tragic question again: escape from post-colonial hardships, lack of respect, opportunities, feeling like an outsider.
Or has it become this internalized colored practice, deeply embedded in their culture, passed down?
The sources suggest it's likely both. A coping strategy born from marginalization and a communal practice that's become a binding social ritual.
And as you said, younger coloreds, 2035, incorporated recreational drugs, marijuana, ecstasy, mushrooms into their social lives, marking another generational layer to this cultural expression.
Fashion, appearance, also plays a huge role in expressing and maintaining identity.
Definitely. Many coloreds consistently wore stylish, westernized clothes, often name brands bought in South Africa or Botswana.
And the motivation wasn't just style. It was explicitly about not looking like a black and being lekker fashionable, cool within their own group.
Yes. And this often contrasted sharply with poorer coloreds, maybe in Thorngrove, who might wear more native clothes out of poverty, not cultural choice, highlighting class differences within the colored identity.
And some informants, like Christine Eriska, even expressed a desire to keep lighter skin tones in the family, disappointed if sons married dark coloreds.
Painful, but it powerfully reflects those deeply internalized colonial beauty standards, favoring lighter skin, certain hair textures, shows the lasting legacy of racial hierarchy even in intimate family choices.
What about manners, how people carried themselves?
The sources reveal this deeply ingrained belief that coloreds are like whites culturally, possessed similar manners, contrasting themselves sharply with blacks.
Who they often perceived, sadly echoing colonial tropes, as like children, they can't think for themselves. A stark articulation of internalized cultural alignment, a way to distinguish themselves.
And this perceived alignment with whites was reinforced constantly by things like hiring black domestic workers, often living poorly right there on the property.
Creating that visible social hierarchy, reinforcing perceived colored superiority, even if it meant the social and cultural invisibility of the domestics.
Their presence often taken for granted, their humanity overlooked. It's a key part of that rhetorical nostalgia we talked about. Older coloreds engaging in a monologue that confirms the superiority of the Rhodesian past over the Zimbabwean present.
Pointing to current problems as proof that Africans were just not ready for the responsibilities of government. A narrative tragically echoing their old colonial rulers.
Yeah, it's deeply complex.
Finally, marriage patterns offer a powerful window into the enduring identity boundaries.
Overwhelmingly, the preference was marrying other coloreds. A striking 90% of participants in the study said they stick to your own kind.
And a strong prejudice against black partners. That 12-year-old Carla saying blacks have AIDS, reflecting fears she's heard.
Chilling, but it reveals those deep-seated fears and prejudices that persist.
And the consequences of marrying outside the group, though rare, were severe.
Very stark. Anita Nyati and Joyce Chidno, 2 colored women married to black men. They were subsequently classified as black. by their own community, by society.
Wow. That powerfully shows how marriage directly impacts, even reclassifies, racial identity in this complex system, further digging in those boundaries, highlighting the pressure to keep the lines distinct.
Even without explicit laws enforcing it anymore, the social pressure remained immense. #tag echoes and reflections connecting the colored experience.
Okay, so after diving deep into the laws, the social complexities, the intimate details of daily life, it's really important to step back and remember that race as a concept, it's fundamentally fluid, transforming.
Right. It's a social classification, first and foremost, not biological. It's shaped by the theoretical and social discourses floating around in a particular time and place.
And the colored identity is such a potent, living example of this, isn't it?
Absolutely. It started as this rigid colonial category imposed from outside. Then, remarkably, it got adopted, adapted, constantly renegotiated over generations.
To really get it, you have to see it not as fixed biology, but as this dynamic social construct. Its meaning, its implications have changed across different historical periods, different political situations.
It's really a testament to how human groups navigate labels forced on them and forge their own sense of self within and sometimes against those labels.
And comparing this to mixed race identities in the U.S., it throws up some striking parallels, but also some really crucial differences.
Big differences. In the U.S., for so long, you had the infamous one-drop rule. Historically, any known African ancestry meant you were classified as Black. Period, regardless of other heritage.
Created that rigid black-white binary, very different from the Southern African colored category, which explicitly acknowledged a distinct in-between space.
And the U.S. Supreme Court's Plessy v. Ferguson decision in 1896, separate but equal, and eventually removing mulatto from the census, that just reinforced the binary, effectively erased official recognition of mixed identities.
And that U.S. context gave birth to the tragic mulatto archetype in literature, didn't it?
Famously, characters like in Nella Larsen's Passing, often shown as sad, lost, even suicidal because they don't fit neatly into Black or white society.
A trope of perpetual alienation, reflecting the psychological toll of being caught between worlds that won't fully acknowledge you.
And then there's that complex, often painful idea of racial betrayal or selling out, which Randall Kennedy wrote about.
Actions within the Black community seen as going against the group, marrying white, acting white, speaking white, opposing affirmative action.
Exactly. It highlights the immense internal pressures, the expectations of group loyalty that can exist within racialized communities.
We even see echoes and critiques of figures like Senghor, first president of Senegal, choosing to write his powerful poetry in French, seen by some as speaking white, distancing from indigenous African identity.
It shows how complex navigating identity and expectation can be, but the colored position in Southern Africa, as we've explored, it's unique, maybe even more precarious.
It was an externally imposed category that gradually solidified into an internal identity, much more nuanced than the U.S. one-drop rule, just absorbing people into Blackness.
That uniqueness comes partly from having their indigenous roots denied, right? They were systematically framed as an urban people.
A classification that effectively denied them indigenous roots, ties to tribal lands, linked directly to that 00 on the ID cards, meaning no rural ancestral homes, no traditional land claims.
Often seen by outsiders as lost, worthy of sympathy. A narrative you see in literature like Sarah Gertrude Million's God's Stepchildren, describing them almost tragically as a broken tribe.
Frantz Fanon, in Black Skin, White Masks, offers that powerful psychological take, arguing a Black man is always just that, a Black man. And accepting this leads to self-acceptance liberation.
Which contrasts sharply with Mugabe's call for Africanization in Zimbabwe, wanting to absorb coloreds into a broader Black-defined African identity.
But as we've seen, many colors deeply resisted that assimilation, insisted on their distinct identity, choosing a path different from Fanon's embrace of singular Blackness.
And the power of memory, the power of place, absolutely central here, tangible anchors for identity.
Like the District 6 Museum in Cape Town we mentioned. Such a powerful example.
It doesn't just show artifacts, it actively affirms colored identity, resists the ruptured landscapes of forced removal, ensures that painful past isn't forgotten, minimized, erased.
The very layout of cities, that topography of power, reflected and reinforced racial structures. The museum fights back against the narrative that colored identity is so-called or unimportant, stands as a monument to resilience, the right to remember, the right to define yourself.
Which leads us to this really profound, maybe surprising insight. Colored identity itself, in how it persists, evolves. It can be seen as a powerful form of resistance.
It started defined by its place within the three-tiered social structure of colonialism. A rigid box.
But then, crucially, it was powerfully internalized and maintained by coloreds themselves, transforming from imposed category to self-defined community.
So by continuously asserting their unique identity through their own methods of inclusion and exclusion, their culture, social gatherings, language,
They are, in a very real way, creating a binding law for themselves, exercising remarkable agency in a system that often tried to deny their existence, absorb them, make them invisible.
it's an act of democracy, self-determination, and insistence on existing on their own terms.
You could absolutely see it that way.
Which raises this important universal question for all of us, doesn't it? In societies that often push for unity, for a single national identity, what space is there for distinct identities that, for their own reasons, resist being fully assimilated?
What does it mean for a group to say, we are different and we will define ourselves?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it just reveals how incredibly complex identity formation is, especially in post-colonial nations wrestling with their histories.
It's a continuous negotiation, isn't it? Dynamic. Between historical legacies, external pressures to conform or blend in, and the internal self-definition of a group, insisting on its unique place, its unique story.
It really highlights that enduring human need for recognition, for belonging, but on your own terms. The fundamental right to self-identify, even when powerful narratives try to erase or absorb you. #outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've really journeyed through this unique, persistent identity of the colored community in Southern Africa.
They've seen how history, social experiences, individual choices all weave together to shape who a group believes it is. And, just as importantly, how others see them.
The colored experience is such a powerful reminder that identity, it's rarely simple, rarely static.
It's dynamic, evolving, born in that crucible of colonial categories, forged in the ongoing struggle for recognition, for belonging, in complex post-colonial worlds.
It shows how groups navigate shifting politics, tough economic realities, deeply ingrained social views, often against huge odds, simply by insisting on being themselves.
So considering how the colored community keeps defining, redefining its place, its worth in this post-colonial world, what does this deep dive tell you?
About that enduring human need for recognition, for belonging, for the right to self-identify even when powerful forces push for assimilation.
Maybe think about how the lines of identity get drawn and redrawn in your own world.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
We really hope this exploration leaves you with a richer, maybe more empathetic understanding of the incredibly complex tapestry of human identity.